The generals led the war, but not the empire. The obedient empire, Russia on the brink of collapse. Tsarist Russia during the First World War was not a state, but a mechanism of obedience. An empire that had ruled for centuries through fear now sought to enter an industrial, modern war with that same fear, a war that did not forgive blind obedience. Power in Russia did not rise from below, it was imposed from above. The Tsar issued commands, the generals repeated them, and the soldiers died, without ever knowing what victory was supposed to look like. Militarily, Russia was vast but slow, numerous but disorganized, brave yet incapable of turning bravery into results. An army built for the wars of the 19th century was hurled into the 20th without transformation. Generals cared more about pedigree than tactics, and the general staff was more preoccupied with political loyalty than battlefield reality. In this army, mistakes from above went unpunished, but failure below was answered with death. Politically, the war was the Tsar's final gamble. He believed an external victory could silence internal crisis. But the war not only failed to silence it, it armed it. Every military defeat was a political victory for revolution. Every supply train that failed to arrive made Bolshevik speeches more convincing. And every distrusted officer broke another link in the chain of power. But perhaps the most dangerous fracture was neither political nor military. It was in the meaning of loyalty itself. Officers no longer knew to what they should be loyal. To the Tsar? To Russia? To starving soldiers? Or to an honor that grew more meaningless by the day? When an officer begins to question the meaning of an order, the army collapses before the final shot is fired. The philosophy of power in Tsarist Russia was simple. Power comes from above, and resistance is a sin. But the First World War ruthlessly exposed this belief. Power without legitimacy, in times of crisis, turns into blind violence. And blind violence creates neither order nor loyalty, only hatred. In 1917, the revolution was not an accident, but the logical outcome of a decaying system. When the state collapsed, the army fractured into armies, red, white, gray, each claiming to be the savior of Russia. At this moment, officers were no longer tools of power. They were power itself. And precisely in this historical limbo, these 10 officers emerged. Neither heroes nor traitors, but men who tried to give meaning to power amid the ruins of an empire. History, however, shows no mercy to those who understand too late. Episode 18, Officers on the Edge of Red. A frozen empire, 10 officers, and a revolution that began in the trenches. Empires do not always fall with a single bullet, sometimes with soldiers' hunger, sometimes with disastrous orders, and sometimes with officers who no longer know whether they are fighting for the Tsar or simply to survive. During World War I, Tsarist Russia collapsed not only on the battlefield, but in the minds of its commanders. From the forests of Poland to the snows of Galicia, from the Winter Palace of St. Petersburg to the muddy trenches of Eastern Europe, these 10 officers were the last pillars of an army that rotted from within long before its military defeat. 10 officers of a dying empire. 1. Nikolai Nikolaevich, the Grand Duke, the Lost Commander. Title: Commander-in-Chief of the Russian Army. Traits: aristocratic, traditionalist, inflexible. At the war's outset, he symbolized imperial authority. But his inability to coordinate Russia's massive armies led to repeated defeats. His dismissal marked the beginning of officers' loss of faith in the throne. He commanded the army, but not the age. 2. Alexei Brusilov, victories without a future. Tactical genius. Innovative, professional, realistic. The only commander who dealt a real blow to Germany and Austria-Hungary. The Brusilov offensive of 1916 was a military masterpiece, but a worn-out army and absent political support prevented it from becoming decisive. He won the war, but the empire was already dead. 3. Mikhail Alexeyev, the brain of the staff, victim of politics, chief of the general staff, precise, analytical, conservative. He understood better than anyone that the army was collapsing, but trapped between the Tsar, the Duma, and the streets, he was powerless. When the revolution arrived, there was nothing left to save. When reason stands alone, revolution is inevitable. 4. Lav Kornilov, the sword against revolution, rebel general, brutal, anti-Bolshevik, authoritarian. He sought to restore order with an iron fist. His attempted coup against the provisional government failed, and that failure opened the door to the Bolsheviks. He wanted to save Russia by destroying its freedom. 5. Anton Denikin, honor in a ruthless world, commander of the volunteer army, loyal, moral, tragic. Denikin believed in a united Russia, neither Tsarist nor Bolshevik. History, however, shows no mercy to men of moderation. He fought correctly at the wrong time. 6. Alexander Kolchak, the admiral on land, leader of the White Forces, adventurous, idealistic, isolated. From the navy to land leadership, he declared himself supreme ruler of Russia. Without popular support, his fall was inevitable. He took the crown, but not the country. 7. Paul von Rennenkamp, the general of shameful defeats, commander of the First Army, arrogant, ineffective, isolated. His personal rivalry with General Samsonov led to the disaster of Tannenberg, one of the worst defeats in Russian history. His pride killed the army more than the enemy did. 8. Alexander Samsonov, the general who took his own life, victim of defeat, honorable, depressed, tragic. After Tannenberg, he could not live with the disgrace of defeat. In a forest, he ended his life with his own weapon. He lost the war and then himself. 9. Nikolai Yudenich, the last hope of the Northern Front, successful commander against the Ottomans, decisive, effective, forgotten. The only commander to achieve real victories. The revolution, however, rendered them meaningless. He defeated the enemy, but not history. 10. Sergei Markov, the death-seeking officer. Title, symbol of white resistance. Traits, charismatic, extreme, heroic. Amid chaos, he became a legend, but legends do not survive revolutions. He died for Russia, but for a Russia that no longer existed. Conclusion, collapse from within. 10 officers, 10 destinies, one bitter truth. Brusilov, victory without a future. Kornilov, order without the people. Denikin, honor without power. Kolchak, authority without legitimacy. Tsarist Russia did not fall by bullets, but by hunger, mistrust, and officers who no longer knew what they were fighting for. End of episode 18, and the beginning of Red Blood. Coming next, episodes 18.1 to 18.10, individual portraits of each officer, from the battlefield to the Revolutionary Tribunal, and how their decisions paved the way for the birth of the Soviet Union. But everything begins with one lost commander. Episode 18.1 begins with this story. Nikolai Nikolaevich, the Grand Duke, the lost commander. A man born to command empires, yet remembered for a war he could never control. His choices, his silences, and his failure to prevent collapse set the course for everything that followed. Revolutions do not begin in palaces. They are born in trenches. If you want to explore different chapters of history through real, dramatic, and gripping narratives, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you'll be the first to watch the next episode.